Star Wars: Fate of the Old Republic. Let's talk about it. So in case you've been living under a rock or you just didn't watch the Game Awards, well, let me fill you in. During the Game Awards, we saw a slew of announcements and trailers, and I think one of the most impactful ones, or one of the most hyped trailers, during the entire show's runtime was definitely Star Wars: Fate of the Old Republic. Now, of course, it's Star Wars. I think everybody knows that it's going to be hyped up, but I think the secondary most important reason that this trailer blew up so much is also because of the fact that Hudson, the original project director for Mass Effect 1, 2, 3, and KOTOR, yes, the original KOTOR games, is the one who's heading this new The Old Republic game. And we're gonna get a little bit more into Casey and his history later on in the video, but let's talk about some few details that people have been picking up in the teaser trailer. And of course, I've already seen some comments talking about the possible ship that is landing on this rainy, mysterious planet. Some people think it might be the Ebon Hawk itself. That is, Revan's ship, but it doesn't, like, when you look at it closely, it looks a little bit too pointy to be the Ebon Hawk. It also doesn't have the orange coloration, so I'm thinking this is a different ship, but it could definitely be one of those hammerhead ships for sure. And then another detail is when they land on the rainy planet, you have this ship in the horizon, and that is probably the Leviathan. I'm thinking it's the Leviathan because it looks exactly the same in the silhouette, so it's possible that this could be the Leviathan from KOTOR, maybe another, but I'm guessing because this is an Old Republic game, it has some form of connection to the games. It has to have it. Now, as far as I know, we haven't really found many more details that are like super recognizable, but we have other details that we learned about from the official interview on StarWars.com between Casey Hudson and the GM of Lucasfilm, Douglas Riley. And I'm gonna read this entire thing for you, but I'm gonna put timestamps down below if you've already read this or if you don't care, so you can skip through at your own leisure. So the interview starts with blending innovative storytelling, memorable characters, and heart-pounding combat. Star Wars: Fate of the Old Republic will immerse you in an unforgettable experience where every decision deepens your journey toward the light or the darkness. Pretty much already confirming that this will, of course, be an RPG where your choices matter. Good shit. When we developed the original KOTOR, we wanted to create a definitive Star Wars experience, crafting an adventure that consisted of all the things we dreamed of doing as Star Wars fans, Hudson says. Now, 25 years after we started work on that game, our aspirations are equally ambitious. Fate of the Old Republic represents an opportunity to explore a contemporary vision of a definitive Star Wars experience using state-of-the-art technology in game design, and an all-new story crafted specifically to deliver on the combination of player agency and immersion in Star Wars that was the heart of KOTOR. And Riley says here that it is not a direct sequel or a continuation, but that it is being built by people who helped shape the legacy. Throughout my 2 decades of working on Star Wars games, including Star Wars: The Old Republic, I have been fortunate to see firsthand just how much these stories mean to our fans. For us, this new project is about honoring that legacy by creating something in the same tradition of a deep, cinematic, choice-driven, role-playing game. Reuniting with Casey has been a tremendous honor, and we are pouring all of our shared passion and experience into building the next great chapter. Then Casey went on a little bit with his history with Star Wars. Star Wars has been an ever-present force in my life from the time I saw the first movie in 1977 and throughout my career, where it's been a constant source of inspiration. It's hard to describe how exciting it was to be able to work in the Star Wars galaxy, contributing to its incredible legacy. We had so much fun working on Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, and it was one of the defining experiences of my career. Exactly, because that kickstarted his journey with Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. And apparently, Casey has been in contact with Lucasfilm for over 20 years, but he says that this project takes a lot of commitment, but it finally lined up for everyone involved, and so, they kickstarted the studio. Our goal is developing the kind of games I love making, emotionally powerful cinematic adventures driven by player agency, narrative depth, and immersive world building. Conversations between our team and Lucasfilm Games led to an incredible opportunity to return to Star Wars, and once again we can hardly believe we're working on such a special project. The interview continues, still in the early stages of development and creation. Fate of the Old Republic benefits from decades of creative experiences across the collaborative partnership. I've always strived to lead very focused projects with creative clarity and enlightenment among the team and a crispy, organized production plan, Hudson says. That's ultimately what makes it possible to deliver a game that meets high expectations, but consistently achieving that with large and ambitious projects with ever-increasing demands on scope and complexity has been a lifelong journey of learning and improvement and a personal obsession of mine. Then he goes into what his role is with this game. Of course, as a director, he partners up with his team as well as Lucasfilm Games to bring the clear vision to life. Great ideas come from all parts of the team, he said, so my job is to gather and shape a cohesive vision that the entire team contributes to. Ensuring that everyone shares that vision and understands their part is creating it is critical to the success of a project. And this newest chapter in Star Wars gaming history will touch on what Hudson sees as the fundamental pillars of the franchise, such as innovative storytelling, memorable characters, challenging gameplay, and immersive agency in the Star Wars galaxy. Now, I know this is kind of like a corporate sort of article here, of course, like they're trying to represent their game, but they can't say too much, so it sounds a lot like, corporate mumbo jumbo. But one thing that actually got to me here was when they're talking about the ways they tell their stories, or like how many stories they can tell in the Old Republic, which I think is really important to mention. Being set in the past gives us an immense amount of open space to tell new original Star Wars stories while staying true to the spirit of the galaxy we all love. There are quite literally infinite stories to tell. While we will always honor and celebrate the core saga, it's crucial to explore new territory, meet new characters, and see new parts of the galaxy. I agree with that, especially with the Old Republic and events that have taken place thousands of years before the movies, etc. You can just leave all that well enough alone and just do other stories that are just as memorable, or even more so, because like the Knights of the Old Republic games are so iconic that most games like struggle to get to that iconic status that the Old Republic games have. Now, another question that people are trying to solve is like when the game is going to come out. Is it going to be like post 2030? Is it going to be like 5 years from now? Because apparently Jason Schreier, the famous insider reporter, has essentially said that it's not looking like it's going to be like 2030, because he thinks that it is probably going to be after that. However, Casey Hudson himself has responded to Jason Schreier, essentially saying, don't believe the rumors, the game will be out before 2030. Whether that means like the 31st of December 2029, maybe, or like maybe it's already on its way. Maybe they've gone, far ahead with the production. I doubt that it's very far, because they've only been existing for like 6 months or something, like the studio. Not sure exactly how long the studio itself has been there, but obviously this is a new project, and but if Casey says so, I guess we'll have to, kind of trust him. Now, why I say kind of trust him is because as much as I personally like Casey, he is obviously one of the most, I would say, iconic visionaries in gaming. He's kind of like George Lucas in a way. He is essentially the one who made sure to have cinematic camera angles when you're talking to your companions in Mass Effect. He is the one who was very adamant on having your saves being like moved to the next game and so on. So like having like a save game that affects the next game. He has been a very iconic person and important person in game development. Without some of his like insights, like for example the cinematic camera angles, Baldur's Gate 3 would not really be what it is. I really don't believe it would be, because it's thanks to this idea of having a cinematic conversation with your companions that makes a lot of companions today stand out, and a lot of companions being like lovable. But then again, Casey didn't make these games on his own. He had people like James Olin, who is again working on Exodus, his own game. He also had Drew Karpyshyn, who like wrote the main story for these games. Like he had a team of people that could like be the checks and balances, right? Sort of like George Lucas. You might have read into what happened with George Lucas and all the drama surrounding him. Now, why I bring that up is because Casey Hudson also kind of have like a colorful colorful sort of history, because you might know Anthem, and we all know what happened to Anthem at this point. It was meant to be this big-ass live shooter game that was supposed to pull in the Call of Duty audience, but it unfortunately didn't, and then he just left after just a short time of starting up the game, and then he returned later on, and when he returned, he became the general manager of BioWare, and unfortunately, that meant that Joplin, which was the original Dragon Age 4, was cancelled, it was canned, and so people were moved over to work on Anthem. So understandably, we have people who just really, you know, are a little bit unsure about, let's say unsure about Casey Hudson here. Now, you have to respect his work previously, but there is a lot of colorful, let's say, drama that's been going on. So I am personally excited for this because it's a Knights of the Old Republic game. It's an Old Republic game. Of course, you have to be excited, but I do understand that people are like, I'm gonna take this with a grain of salt because I'm not sure how this is gonna end up, because obviously he's not working with all of the same team as he did before. For now, I would say a game like, for example, Exodus has kind of a stronger team for now, but we don't know the people really involved with this new game. We only know about Casey Hudson so far, and we also know about the involvement of Lucasfilm, of course, but like the other devs, can't say. It might turn out that they have an equally strong team. I really hope so, because we really want an Old Republic game, for crying out loud. What happened with the remakes, man? Is that even happening anymore? Of course, there's always somebody who pops up every year to tell us, yes, that the Old Republic is still a thing, but it's like, yeah, okay, but you're kind of, you know, I don't know if it's even happening anymore. Can we even apply that Revan teaser when he turns on his lightsaber anymore? Is that, you know, is it happening even anymore? So the thing is, I understand a lot of people have been talking about this idea that publishers and studios, they keep announcing games very early and then it releases like 4 or 5 years down the line, or maybe not even, you know, maybe it takes even longer because they have to delay the game and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited personally. Right now, I'm mostly excited for, of course, Divinity, and then of course that made by Larian, that is, and then of course Exodus, which, you know, I'm just loving the world building. Of course, I'm seeing, you know, people talk about like the reactions to the trailers and stuff like that, and you know, I think Archetype is listening a lot, but, you know, for this game, Fate of the Old Republic, well, I would like to see more first. But again, all respect to Casey. I actually saw him in the audience when I was sitting in the back row, because I was at the Game Awards and I saw him and I kind of wanted to go over to say hi, but I was like, you know, I'm just gonna let him be because, you know, I want to be respectful and I don't want to like take up his time. But it was pretty cool. Like, it was a cool reveal, but there's been a kind of an interesting reaction to this. Mostly excitement, but also with like a, you know, hint of a grain of salt, I guess. At any rate, this has been the video for today. Thank you for watching, as always, guys, and thank you to all my patrons for supporting the channel. You're all awesome. Mr. Hudson, signing off.